Welcome to JAZZforum. I'm Rusty Hassan, your host. Our guest today is the legendary vibraphonist and my longtime friend Lennie Cuje. Lennie's been a fixture on the jazz scene for over 60 years and has recently donated his personal collection of historical video and audio recordings to the Field C. Grant Jazz Archives. Lennie Cuje has truly experienced a life on a grand scale, and we are delighted that he is here today to share his story. Welcome, Lennie.
Thank you, Rusty.
Wow. You know, Lennie, I've known you for a long time, but it's when I was teaching jazz history at American University and I'd assign term papers to my students. Usually be Miles Davis, Count Basie, or Duke Ellington. And this young African-American woman came up to me. She said, I want to do a paper on a musician I know that I hear a lot. And it was you. And it was from that term paper that I found out, after I'd known you for a long time, about your experiences of being in the German army at age 14 and how you discovered jazz. Tell us a little bit about that experience of being so young and being at the end of World War II.
Actually, I was 12.
Oh, my goodness.
And we were taken prisoner. Well, the SS included us then at the last days. I became a machine gunner of an MG-42 machine gun with 1,000 rounds of ammunition. It fired 2,000 a minute, but they gave us 1,000 and said, be sparingly, you know. So I surrendered and was taken prisoner by the French, was the Free French Army. And we were in for a day or two in a big sort of enclosed, and they said 9 to 12-year-olds can go. And I didn't know where to go. It was southern Germany, it was Danube down there. So I went to a convent and knocked on the door, and I had my little friend who was actually the machine gun feeder, you know. He was a year younger, was 11. And so we knocked into this convent, and the nuns took us in and gave us some food, and we stayed there till the war was over on April 20th or whatever it was.
Wow. It was around that time that you heard some jazz. How did that happen around that end of the war?
Not yet, because these were French troops, you know. It's when they let us go, and I took my little friend. He went to Berlin to try to find his mother, and I went to Frankfurt. And we started marching and stayed pretty much in the French sector because we were more familiar. The Americans were strange to us because we only knew them from airplanes.
Right,
you know?
wow, okay.
So we got to near Schaffenburg, we got to the American sector, an American Guard sentry. And we said, trying to find our families, our mother and so. And I heard this very strange music on the radio. And I said, oh, African music, because the nun said this is sort of African music. You know. He said, no, American. Lionel Hampton was Flying Home.
Flying Home, Lionel Hampton playing the vibes.
I said, that's where I'm going to have to go someday. You know, that's where it all started.
Wow, boy.
And instead of shooting us, I was so afraid, he gave us a K ration, some chewing gum, which never known what chewing gum was, and a little chocolate bar, and I was sold.
Wow, absolutely. So how'd you make your way to America?
Well, I got to Frankfurt. I did find my mother and my family, and got my brother finally home. And then my aunt made contact with my aunt, who was a lawyer here in Washington, and she said, I've got to get Lennie out of Germany. He's going to go under. We bring him over. So in 1950, I was able to she booked a passage on the SS America, and I threw my German hat overboard when we left France.
Fantastic,
and I said goodbye, you know.
Yes.
And arrived in New York Friday the 13th of January, 1950.
Wow, okay. And you were already into jazz by that time?
I heard it on the American Forces Network.
Mostly as listening? And when did you start performing?
Well, then I first came and went to Washington Lee High School and played trumpet in the Washington High School band, and little jazz, you know, started on the trumpet, but it was eventually the vibraphone.
Okay, so you played the trumpet, and then the vibraphone was the one that really drew it. Listening to that Lionel Hampton recording, probably.
It was my, destiny. I had to get to the vibraphone, and was able to buy one at Willis music store in Clarendon, a little Jenko just 2.5 octaves or something small, you know.
Absolutely.
And, started taking lessons with Bob Sipp from the Army Band, and then struck out into Washington, seeing whether we
So you served as a child in the German Army, but as a young adult, you were in the American Air Force. So
Yes, well, I was, when I came, I was 19, what was I?
50, 51?
16,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
1950. So
Yeah,
I became
so
a junior at Washington Lee High School.
Okay.
So 17.
And
Yeah.
after you came out of high school, did you get drafted? How'd that happen?
Well, then I turned 18, got my draft notice,
Right.
and went into the American Air Force.
American Air Force
Korean
during
War.
the Korean War.
Yes. So I said, man, am I supposed to go from war to war?
War to
you
war,
know?
no. So what were you doing in the Air Force?
New Mexico,
Okay.
in Special Weapons Command. We
Okay.
worked with atomic explosions
Oh,
and
wow, okay.
atomic
Boy.
tests and all that
Mhm,
stuff,
mhm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got out and finally was able to get a vibraphone.
Absolutely.
And in 56 I got out of the Air
Mhm.
Force, yeah.
So with your own vibes, what were you doing musically at that time when you were out of the service? What
No,
were you-
not till I got out of the service and took lessons with Bob Sipp from the Army Band to get some
Okay.
chops
Mhm.
and started striking out and carrying the little vibraphone, and had my first gig down at Harrigan's at the waterfront
Oh, here in Washington,
in
right?
Washington,
Okay.
yes. And
Okay. And who were some of the musicians that you worked with when you were coming up
Well,
at Harrigan's and places like that?
as usual, my life is never completely normal.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that sold me the vibraphone from Swillers, his name was Dave Rees,
Mm-hmm.
taught music and accordion there. And so I used him as a pianist for the first gig that I got at Harrigan's at the waterfront.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turned out that he was a mass murderer
Oh,
and
gosh.
killed, I think, 28 people that he was eventually convicted
Oh,
for.
gosh.
So that was a very strange
Yes.
start of
Boy,
my
that was
musical career.
Really, absolutely, Lord.
Yeah. But then, you know, I kept practicing, learning, and went from Harrigan's, which was sort of a jazz meeting, jam place.
Mm-hmm.
Met Ellsworth Gibson.
Ellsworth Gibson,
And-
fantastic pianist,
Yes,
really, yeah.
and got that way hooked up and included into more the black Washington
Mm-hmm.
musician scene.
Okay,
You know,
sure.
that's sort
Sure.
of what
So
I
who were
was
some of the
looking
African
for.
American musicians? I know you recorded with Billy Hart on a
Yeah,
Clark
he was a
recording.
youngster.
Yes, absolutely. Before he really
But it
became
was
prominent. But his
Ellsworth
start.
Gibson and Ben Stuberville, all the older black musicians,
Mhm.
and so we got started with a trio with Ben Stuberville bass, Ellsworth Gibson and vibes, and started playing around town as a trio, and got to know more and more people, you know.
So, you know, this is Washington in the late 50s and early 60s, right?
This would be
But
March 57, no, this is about 56, 57.
57, mid-50s,
yeah,
okay.
58, up to
Okay.
58.
yeah.
And there was a lot of, what was that street, was not Rick's Place, something like that up here on R, but between 16th and 17th, and that whole street had musicians living there.
Uh-huh.
You know, there was the Clark and Snooks, Teddy Smith, all these guys, Herschel McGinnis, Leo Parker.
Right, Leo Parker, prominent baritone saxophonist, played
Barry,
with Billy
yes.
Eckstine's orchestra,
Yeah.
in fact, yeah.
So we worked
Snooks
on-
Riley, is somebody you mentioned? Teddy Smith was another one?
Jimmy
Bass-
McField's.
Jimmy
best-
McPhail,
yes.
okay. So you're from Germany, but you're involved with predominantly African American musicians playing in an era when it was Washington D.C. was segregated. I mean,
Yes.
this is the 50s.
Coming
and how
from Germany, I didn't know, and I
Uh-huh.
didn't have that American
Absolutely, it's ironic, isn't it?
You know, that American
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
So, to me, jazz and black was, in my memory, unanimous, you know, and because in Germany, that's what the films we saw with Louis Armstrong and things,
Sure,
you know. So,
absolutely.
but, so I totally felt comfortable with all these black musicians. And then U Street with my first job. The first one was La Comère. I think it was on 14th Street. And we brought some business, and the next day we came in after they'd done business, and we worked for a hamburger and 2 Gunther beers. The joint was packed, and Jimmy Smith hit town
Okay.
with Donnell Schwartz and Benny Bailey, and that whole organ
Yeah, right. There was
scene
Hammond
started.
B3 organ. Yes,
Oh,
that was
boy.
really.
And there was my little instrument sitting there with him, little Janko, and I went to get it, and he said, "You want to sit in, boy?" And, you know, praising, "Oh, yes."
Okay.
He said, "You know, I remember April." I said, "Oh, yes."
Okay.
One, two. I said, "Oh,
wow. Yes.
and that big organ and that little vibraphone." But it was an experience. And
Experience
it told
for you.
me
Yes,
also, told me, "Lennie, get into your place and start at the bottom." You know,
Really working,
it let me know, yes.
developing your craft and developing your discipline on it. And how did you? I mean, you're sitting in with guys, but what also kind of music education did you have in terms of?
Well, I had classical, you know, training and all, but my jazz thing came just from playing and learning.
Okay.
And especially Ellsworth Gibson was very important because I worked a lot with him and I learned and the feel, you know, and jazz music. Later I went to Tennessee and went to Tennessee University and took harmony theory and composition
Okay.
to catch up on the technical
some formal
parts.
education with
you
it
know.
in Tennessee. I understand you had quite an experience in Tennessee also at performing for some folks that normally wouldn't hire you. There's a little anecdote that you told me about playing for somebody running for office or something like that. And
Yeah, and well, and Peter, the bassist from London, came through. He did a movie with Kim Novak, and I had a gig, and we played the gig, and the lights would go out and come back on. He said, "What's going on, Lennie?" He said, "It's a wife-swapping party,"
oh, oh my goodness.
which were very popular at that time in Tennessee.
Oh my gosh.
And
boy, the experiences that you had.
all Peter would say, "Oh."
Right, okay, absolutely.
But
boy, yeah.
part of the scene. And we were accepted enough. And I did have a black guitar player with Daddy Lean. And that was sort of the integration of East Tennessee because
okay, sure.
he was part of the trio.
Absolutely.
And we played the wife swapping party, and there was a blackie as they sat
Wow,
down there then,
right,
you know.
Right.
It was different. It was
Tell
1958.
us about DC in the 60s and getting into the 70s.
I came the 60s back to Washington.
Yeah.
And that's when I started really working and
Right.
joined Buck Clark's band. And we worked U Street. Actually joined him on Connecticut Avenue that was called Leonardo's. And below that was the Flame. And
Now, I recently played a recording that you gave me years ago. I played it on the air it was at the Republic Garden. I don't know if it was recorded there, but it was like that Buck Clark group with the young Billy
from
Hart.
there we moved to Republic Garden. and
right,
stayed
on
there
U Street.
18 months, I think. We
Okay.
stayed there a long time, yeah. And
Now, was that a recording you made, or was that something that Buck got recorded?
yeah, that was at that time, and Argo came.
An
and-
Argo
and
came,
we
okay,
went-
major Chicago label.
And we recorded in that same place where Charlie Bird did his big famous
Jazz
with-
Samba?
with Stan Getz,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, up at the
And it
church.
was somewhere uptown. they-
Right,
they
the
recorded that.
Unitarian Church on
Right,
16th Street.
exactly. That
Mhm.
was that's
Yes,
what it was. yes,
absolutely,
yes.
wow.
And,
So, that was actually done, let's see, that was done before the Jazz Samba recording was done up there, if I'm not mistaken. That's
That
interesting.
clock, I think, was 64.
Oh, 64.
Yeah.
Okay, it was afterwards. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was in the
Good,
60s.
good, okay.
Because then we had to make a trip like they used to do to promote that.
Sure. Okay. Did you
record.
do a tour with it and
We
everything?
went up to New England,
Okay.
and which was a strange trip, you know.
Uh huh.
And Buck Clark with a broken leg and in a, what do you call it, cement, you know, hanging out of the window, and a little hanger, and Charlie Hampton eating chicken in the back seat. He couldn't pass a chicken place.
Oh, good job.
And we had a hanger with the instruments, and the first thing
Right,
happened that the state trooper
right.
stopped us, you
Oh
know,
Lord.
and looked in and
Nix-
said, "What is this? Are you
Right.
the chauffeur?" I said, "Yes, I'm the chauffeur." You know.
Oh,
He
God.
said, "So you're playing up to driving all these black folks?" I said,
Oh,
"Yes, I'm the
oh,
chauffeur. We're
Lord.
going to New England
Hey, boy.
and the Red Barn." Yeah, those days, you know.
God, I know those days. Jesus. So Charlie Hampton later became the leader of the house band at the Howard Theater. So he
Right,
had some
later,
prominent,
yes, yes. Well, you see, he played
some-
piano and saxophone and
Right.
flute.
Wow.
And, so he was part, and then Billy Hart was on drums, Dwayne Austin bass, and Buck Clark. So that was the band that traveled. It was a wonderful experience,
I'm sure.
you know, to learn to be on the road.
Okay.
And in New England, where black folk, there are no black folks up there wherever we were.
Mm.
And we were set up on this bar. The bandstand was in the middle of the bar in tiers, and I was up front with the vibes. And then came Charlie Hampton and Buck Clark all the way on top. And we'd be playing our album. That's what we're supposed to do.
sure.
And suddenly this guy put his pistol gun on the bar in front of me and said, "Play so and so." I said, "I'm not, you know, talk to the man up there." He said,
Uh-oh.
"Play." I said, "Buck, gun, play so and so." Buck back there, hoomba,
He's on the conga drums, playing the
I
hand
didn't know
drums.
the town was a gangster town.
Oh, wow.
You know.
Jeez, boy. It's quite an experience.
Well,
Yeah. Let's move it forward a little bit to some of the spots that you played a little bit later. I know that One Step Down was certainly prominent in your years.
that came later. I went
Yeah.
to New York first.
Oh, you went to New York?
Yeah, I
Okay,
went to
tell us
New
about
York
your New York
first.
experience then. Let's
And
cover
I
that.
went up there in '64 or '65,
Okay.
I guess, you know. And then Walter Booker
Walter
moved
Booker?
up later. He
Uh-huh.
stayed with Maria at my house.
Okay.
And so I was working there with Larry Coryell a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had
Okay.
a steady gig
Okay.
at the Idlewild Airport for over a year. And then we did a movie together called Up Jumped the Devil with Larry Coryell, John Ramsden on drums, which was sort of a...
And what you said, 64, you said around that time? What years were this?
I'm sorry.
What years was this?
64, 65,
Okay,
66,
yeah.
when we had that first blackout.
Yeah, oh,
was
right.
those
right.
years, yes.
Okay.
And we worked up there at Idlewild Inn, which was a gangster place, and it was empty.
Oh.
Nobody ever, moment somebody came in, they would say, "There's nothing here." I said, "Well, there's a band." No, there's no band. And they were downstairs with their meeting.
Oh, wow.
So we played for 11 months in an empty place.
Oh, Lord.
You know.
With Larry Coryell.
Yes.
Boy, that's incredible.
And he would
Just
do
Jeez.
Tambourine Man.
Yeah, right.
And then a few minutes later, they would come up, play that again,
Oh, geez.
Tambourine Man. But it paid, we made $200 a
Wow.
week cash,
Okay.
which was a lot of money
Yes,
in 1960.
absolutely, yeah.
You know, it was a lot
Yeah.
of money.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that was, then I got to play with Paul Bley, and because I knew Paul from Washington, he was here in state, and worked if I
Right.
could.
Very
Oh.
cutting edge, Paul Blaze. That's fascinating.
You know.
Yeah, okay.
Got to play with some
Gee,
good
Yeah.
Hank Mobley, got to play with Hank, and of course Miles' drummer Joe. I mean
Philly Joe Jones? Or-
Philly Joe, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he would borrow a drum set, play the gig, then hock it.
Oh,
you know. So he had all these hot drums, you know.
Right.
But
Right. Boy.
it was a learning experience.
Absolutely.
you
Well,
know.
it's just an incredible array of prominent musicians that you worked with while you were in New York.
Yes. And that's where I got my nickname Achtung. Philly Joe gave that to me, you know.
Uh-huh.
And then he passed on to Miles. We used to go over to Miles' apartment.
Okay.
He had a house and he said, "It's Achtung," so I became in Miles.
So you hung out with that house that Miles had?
Yes.
Right.
And Miles
Boy.
taught me how to make that gumbo, the
Okay.
Miles Davis gumbo.
Wow.
But
Boy.
those were learning years. And Walter Booker,
Mm-hmm.
he got busy, he was working, and Larry Coryell. So all that came together, and this pianist from those days who played, that recorded, sometimes they sigh, sometimes they cry. Yeah, I forgot his name. Became very much of the modern, the new wave that
Sure.
started
Oh,
coming
yeah,
in.
the avant-garde started coming across, absolutely. So what brought you back to Washington? How'd you wind up back here in D.C.?
Well, I lost my family. I ended up getting sick
Oh, okay.
and all that,
Yeah,
and finally had to leave town
right, okay.
to get myself back together. So I came
Mhm.
back here. I forgot 65, maybe
Okay.
66, something like that. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and had to start all over
You started
again.
reestablish your career in D.C.
Yeah,
Right,
which
right.
was good. You
right.
know.
What were some of the places you played at initially in D.C. coming back here before the One Step Down started their music policy?
Well, there wasn't all that many places.
Yeah.
I mean, played with Maurice Robinson in a place called Hillows,
Uh-huh,
was across the street from the brass rail.
right,
Was Maurice and Snooks and,
Uh-huh.
and that gang.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
A couple
Yeah.
of these guys, you know, with Little Diz and Teddy
Webster
Smith.
Young, yeah, Webster Young, Teddy Smith, they were all guys that went up to New York around the same time you were there, and they came back to D.C.
Right,
also.
right.
For a lot of the same reasons.
Right. Yes.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
Jeez, no.
That's just it. But
No, I remember, well, the One Step Down in particular, since you've done a lot of recording of stuff there, was primarily a bar with a jazz jukebox.
right.
And then Ann Mabuchi, who just passed away about a month and a half ago,
Yes.
hooked up with Joe. Had started doing, jazz performances here. Joe Cohen, who owned, co-owner of the bar, started doing things with Lawrence Wheatley.
Yeah.
But it was Ann who brought in the musicians.
Right. Right.
I mean, she was incredible.
and Joe was there
You
just.
know, Ann was here booking James Moody, Lee Konitz. I mean, it was just an
Yes.
incredible array.
It-
And have cats like you playing regular gigs all the time. Tell us about
Yeah.
that connection.
No, that was the place, you know,
Yeah.
and it was all Ann did it, yeah. And we were there for a long time, a year and a half, something like that, you know, the Sunday band, and sometimes weekends, you know, and filled in.
Yeah, you videotaped a celebration that had Felix Grant talking.
I've got that, you know, and
Yeah,
I
and-
don't think I forgot it.
Well, Felix was really somebody so important to the city, like through both periods of time that you were in D.C.
Well, you're in that
he's-
video that I
You know,
have.
he is on the
Did
radio.
I might
Yeah.
have brought it and gave
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
to
we have it.
Judith, I think.
Yeah, we have it at the archive now.
Yeah, and you're the MC.
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
It was
just-
crosstown jam.
Yeah, right, absolutely, and
Crosstown
bringing
jam.
us all together.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And you and Felix in there, and singer, what's her name?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Shirley Horn would play there all the time
Yeah, but,
too, and just it was just.
She married the piano player. I've got it here somewhere. Wait a second. Jimmy.
Well, don't worry about it. We'll
Yeah, you know
the
who
name will
she.
kick
You
in
know
in a while. Absolutely.
who she was. She married that white piano player.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But in any case, that was really a mainstay. But you also befriended Spike Wilner, who brought you up to New York a lot to play up at Smalls.
Yes.
Tell us how that connection came.
Well,
You know.
the strangest thing about it, he came down, and I brought him down at the Harbor Court Hotel in Baltimore, and we played. And so we started talking, and then one day he said, "You ought to talk to my mom." And so I met his mom, and it turns out she was in the same displaced person camp in 1945
Wow.
as a 5-year-old,
Wow.
as I was as a 12.
12-year-old. Wow.
As we were going after the war,
Uh-huh.
she was. They were Polish refugees, Jewish refugees from East Germany and all.
Wow.
And I came trying to find my mother, and we were at that displaced person camp at the same time. She was a 5-year-old I was 11-year-old, you know, and 12-year-old. But so that's how that connection started. So
Wow.
he said, "You got to meet my mother." So we
Right.
met, and then all
Fascinating
that came
connection.
out, you
Boy.
know. And
Boy, Spike Wilner, incredible pianist who owns 2 clubs up in New York,
yes.
Smalls and Mesrose, you know, and so you got to do a lot of
Oh,
performing up there.
I helped him find those places.
Did you really?
I
Okay.
gave him the okay,
Yes.
especially on the Mesro. I said, "This is
Okay.
the place, Spiky."
Fantastic. Well, that's
Yeah, we
really
became very close
quite
due
a
to
story.
that whole
Absolutely.
history of
Mhm.
his mother and all, you
Mhm.
know, and
Uh-huh.
45, and
Boy.
so we're still very close friends.
Absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely. No,
But
there's no
We
question.
first got that Smalls together, and then the Mesros.
Mesro, right.
Both of them are doing good.
Doing very well.
Yeah,
And he's
yeah.
really important in terms of presenting the music
And we
great
play together.
performances.
It's always, yeah, it's a very special friendship, Spike and
Uh-huh.
I, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's-
I want to touch upon now, you've been documenting a lot of this, recording performances, videotaping stuff, and recently you've started compiling material together to donate to the Felix Grant Jazz Archive. Tell
Yeah,
us about some of the material that you put
because
together.
a lot of stuff happened at Frankie Condon's,
Mm-hmm.
which was a good place,
Mm-hmm.
and Bill Potts was stuck in there, you know, getting back his
Oh,
life
right,
together.
Bill
I was
Potts,
getting
you
my life
documented,
back
right,
together,
absolutely,
so
yeah.
it became
Yeah.
a breeding ground,
Right.
and the
Yeah,
big band
yeah,
of,
okay. Okay.
yeah.
And you're also donating a lot of posters and flyers and stuff like that also?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, so whatever.
Some material.
Because I feel maybe it'll do some good for somebody, you know.
Oh, absolutely. No, this
Yeah.
is invaluable for the research that we've been doing. That it's so
History.
important to have the history of this music. And Lennie, you've been an important part of this history. That it's really, we're so grateful that you contributed the stuff to the archive.
It's
you know,
my
You know, it's-
pleasure that I was able, and like you said, Buck Hill, I think that's some of the best Buck Hill, because Buck never got to record the way he can really, you know, just to hear the full Buck Hill.
Uh-huh. Our guest today on JAZZforum has been celebrated vibraphonist Lennie Cuje. JAZZforum is a production of the Felix Grant Jazz Archives and the Jazz Studies program at the University of the District of Columbia. If you'd like more information about the Felix Grant Jazz Archives or the Jazz Studies program at UDC, please visit our website at www.jazzarchives.org. I'm Rusty Hassan. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Thank you, Rusty.